Hello, everybody. Episode 4 of Our Roots in Tea. So, this podcast, we're going to be exploring all the life topics, existential type of topics, meditation, spirituality, philosophy, mental well-being, psychology, all that kind of stuff. And today, this episode, we're going to be trying out the tea we're doing is called Taylor's. It's the lemon and orange tea. It says zesty and vibrant black tea. It is caffeinated, so that's fine. That's okay. And but we're tonight we're doing Zoom call with Vanessa Panton, my great friend over. I don't know. She's okay now. She's like everywhere. Yeah. She won't be trying the tea with us because since we're doing Zoom call, she's doing her own thing. So.
But I have my own tea, though. It's just not the same kind, but I do have the tea.
Great. Okay. Cool. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, because tea does have that meditative kind of calming effect, which it just fits perfectly with what we're trying to do tonight or what we're talking about. But to get started, I sort of want to just jump right into it, and Vanessa asking you kind of first of all, how you've been, and second of all, because I know you had a moment where you're going through kind of like maybe your own spiritual journey or discovering your inner spiritual self. So I kind of want to know a little bit about how you got started, when, why, all that.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's so nice to see you again. Well, just a little back context. So I haven't seen you in quite a number of years. We just figured out it was like 5.5 years. But you met me at a time when I was really exploring the film community in LA. I'd moved down there to do a conservatory program at Edgemar Center for the Arts. And that was, the primary bridge that brought us together was our love of storytelling. And I had always, and amongst that passion, been super passionate about meditation from a very young age. I read a book called Awakening the Buddha Within. It was by an American guy who had lived in India during the 70s named Lama Surya. And he sort of explained this theology to me that was, having grown up more in a sort of Christian, sort of traditional Christian theology, and moved sort of away from that, obviously, in my adolescence and my teenage years. We weren't very strict about going to church, but I was kind of always looking for an interpretation of reality that I didn't see on TV, that I didn't see in beauty magazines, that I didn't always see in films, represented as in a way that I related to or connected to as a young person. And I found this book when I was about 15, and it really talked about, in very layman's terms, the philosophy of Buddhism and the relationship to understanding that we have a universal connection to all living things on this planet, no matter how small, and that the compartmentalization of worth, so the way that we as human beings have become accustomed to valuing life in a particular category, was actually really far away from the nature of spirit. So that was my sort of inception point, was finding that book and being like, wow, that's how I feel when I get so excited about a sunset or grass or a ladybug. And it's just an ancient wisdom that's come from, primarily Eastern traditions for thousands of years. But all major religions and theologies have these sort of themes throughout them. And then when I was 19 after high school, I moved to Australia. And that's sort of when I first discovered the practice of yoga. And throughout my kind of earlier 20s, I sort of rebelled against the gym. I hated going to the gym. I hated the lights. I hated the treadmill. I was like, there's got to be something better than this. I love dancing. I love being outside. But I was like, I hate this. So when I found yoga, I found it was like the best way for me to actually be authentically in the body, not trying to convince myself that I was 40 more times, which works really well for some people. And I just really noticed the effects that it had in my life. How much less anxiety I had, how much more fluid I was in terms of being able to not hold on to attachments, to not be as frustrated, to have more patience, certain things like that. I just found them very non-dogmatically cultivating this beautiful garden in my life. So that's been an ever-present merriment for me in my life since then. And obviously, like any human being, we kind of ebb and our flow with our disciplines and our passions. But that's always been something that's really, really saved me. And I had a pretty traumatic back injury 10 years ago. I fell out of a 2-story building in Brazil and was actually told that I would probably never walk again. And through a very strong relationship to meditation and to the belief that we actually co-create our reality, we visualize it and it manifests, I was able to not only help heal myself, but also was able to go from might not ever being able to walk again, to the surgery going well, to them being like, you could walk again, to you'll probably walk again in 4 months, to me getting off my medication in 4 days and being fully healed and back at yoga in 6 weeks. And so I've actually been able to live the embodiment practice in my life through its healing capacities. And that sort of like showed me how magical we are as people and how incredibly powerful our bodies are when they work with our mind together, not, in opposite ways. And I would say that, when I came back from LA, it's really interesting you brought that up. When I came back from LA, and I might be a little cliche, I kind of came I came from a theater background, so I wanted to learn more about film. That's why I came there. That's how I met you. And then I sort of came home feeling like I was in a spiritual deficit. So much hustle, so much driving, so much all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, I need to stop. So about 2015, 2016 is when I really started to dive deeper into yogic philosophy and understanding the path, not in a richer way as a student. And I began a 6-month program in Vancouver, which then led to getting my teacher training certificate, which then led to doing a course in Ayurveda, which then led to me working with horses for an extended period of time, and then led to me working on a First Nations reserve in their permaculture garden. So all these sorts of things kind of, led to a little bit of a pivot, and I don't act in films anymore, although I'm still slightly low-grade crazy. So that was a long answer. Sorry, but again, it's like we got a lot to cover here.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot to unpack. Okay, let's backtrack in the very beginning. Okay, because you discovered this book, you said, around when you're like 15 or at least in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had never found this book, do you think you would still go on this path, or because it sounded like you would be still interested in it anyways, but this book was kind of like the pushing point for you?
Yeah, it was definitely the wording that made me feel that gave me a sort of context for what I innately felt. But I actually believe that we have access to that same type of innate feeling of like love and acceptance and comfort, even just by the sheer act of spending time alone in the woods or going to the beach or going outside. I feel, to your point, I do feel that I would always be on some variation of a reverent path. Just because one of the things that actually really keeps me sane in life actually is my ability to perceive beauty. My ability to look for the good aspects of people, my ability to find moments in the day to be grateful. Those simple things have sort of like allowed me to endure a lot of adverse circumstances in life, and I think what's so cool is that that's always available to everyone as well. So yeah, if I didn't find this book on Buddhism and Buddhist philosophy, I probably wouldn't have done Vipassana meditations, like the 10-day retreats that I went on. I probably wouldn't have done that necessarily, and I might not have found yoga necessarily. But I think that I would always be in reverence to beauty.
And it's interesting because it did sound like your perception did change. Because I mean, I don't know if, even before that you're able to feel compassion, you're able to feel empathy or even perceive beauty, or was it just like you kind of slowly discovered it as you kind of went on this journey, and then you're like, oh wow, something opened up my mind or my eyes, and you kind of see things differently?
Yeah. Um, I I don't, sometimes you ever like stumble ass backwards into things and you kind of like, I think, isn't that what, like, I feel like all of your like teens and your 20s is you just like stumbling ass backwards into
Sure.
things and then sort of like dusting it off and
Yeah, yeah,
refining it and being like, maybe I'll keep this. I should throw
yeah,
that away.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I would say that was probably my process of discovery. It wasn't ever a very intentional thing.
Okay.
I think that my priorities just sort of have naturally shifted,
Mhm.
but I was always in a relationship with spirit since I was a young person. I was always, I mean, I was also an only child, so I spent a lot of time talking to myself. I had a I had a which actually is a lot more palatable when you just call it prayer.
You had an
So
imaginary friend.
exactly. And then I was like, ooh, if I change my imaginary friend to spirit, people will think I'm less crazy. Hence why I did acting.
Okay. Wait. So
So
do you actually believe in ghosts then? Have you seen ghosts? Is that because you said you believe in spirit? So
I believe, I mean, I've never seen ghosts. So I've definitely never seen ghosts. I feel like I've heard some funky stuff sometimes in
okay,
older places that I've been.
okay,
Um, but I mean, like the universal spirit, I feel in life in moments that I can't explain, or the things that happen to you that would only ever very specifically happen to you because you've listened to them or because you've asked for them, pardon me. So it's like you feel like you're being listened to by something. Those are the instances in my life, like especially when I went traveling by myself at 19, that sort of confirmed to me that there seems to be this ongoing magical conversation between us and something that's caring for us in some sort of a way. And I wouldn't say that I have like a perfect, I certainly don't believe in like a white man with like a long beard and a
yeah, yeah,
trident and a cloud. That's not what I'm speaking to, nor do I have any particular lean toward other people's beliefs. But just for myself, I would say that that's been something that feels like a pretty strong conviction for me in my life. And yeah.
okay. And you, so you for you, like you actually sense or you do believe that not just humans, but even other living force out here have their own spirit, like trees have their own spirit.
Yeah.
Okay,
Totally.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, and are you able to distinguish if something is, having a bad spirit or good spirit? I don't even know, that makes sense to you, right? Because I have heard people tell me about how some people you can sense they have like a bad aura or bad energy. So I mean, I don't know if you believe in all that or I mean your opinions on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all, as human beings, no matter what, we every single one of us has an intuition.
Okay.
Every single one of us has a sixth sense. Every single one of us has, their gut feeling. And I think that it just depends on, you know, what your level of sensitivity is in certain moments to be able to tap into it, and also what your level of comfortability is to be able to listen to where that information is pointing you. So I would say that, yeah, absolutely, I can. Sometimes you walk into a room and you're like, oh, it's
Yeah.
not the best vibes, or like you walk into a room and you be like, this is my spot. Or you'll meet somebody on the street and you'll be like, I don't know that person, but I feel like they're my family. Or other times you meet someone and you're like, yeah, I'm cool for that like short 5-minute visit. I don't think I need to repeat that. So I think we all have these little internal guiding systems. So yeah, I'm not like, I wouldn't say I'm higher on any kind of spectrum in order to be able to perceive that. I just think that that's definitely something that I've learned to trust more as I've gotten older.
Well, but when you say that, isn't it kind of bad though? Because I mean, you don't want to just trust anyone, right? Because because
Mm-mm.
yeah, so when you say you learn to trust more, I'm sure you meant like more selectively, right? Based on your sensitivity and how you feel.
Yeah, of course. I'm just saying, like, how sometimes you ever have a hunch about something and
Okay.
it might not be based in logic, You know what I mean? If you're like, or say you fall in love with somebody that it's totally unexpected, but you just feel this way. Well, that's what I mean about trusting your gut and like trusting I think when I was younger, I would fight a little bit more with myself internally about things and be like, no, I shouldn't do that. No, I can't do that. Whereas like, you know, you have moments of success with being like, this sounds crazy, but I'm going to go for it because I can't stop thinking about it. And then you do it and you're like, okay, yeah, I can learn to trust myself a little bit more. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, no, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. No, just because, it was just a curiosity thing because it's almost, I know what you mean by the gut instinct, gut feeling, because, you know, that can tell a lot about, I mean, of course, maybe that you might not be able to tell if someone's a serial killer or not, but I mean,
I think you can't. That's the problem.
Can you? Are you that sensitive?
No. I said I think you can't. That's the problem.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's why that's like, ooh, you just gotta hope you duck and weave and don't put yourself in those weird situations. But no, I bet some people who are hanging out with like, I mean, we're going to go down a dark road. This is going to be a whole other podcast.
Yes, it will be. Yeah, we won't talk about that. Yeah.
I'm like, I'm sure Ted Bundy was like a really cool guy up until the point that he wasn't, you know, like you can never tell. That's the interesting thing about human beings. Sometimes we can always hide from each other if we want to.
That's true. We do, you know, as human beings, we do like to put on masks, you know. Well, I mean, not actual physical mask. I meant metaphorical.
Yeah, no, I got you. Now we have to put on literal ones, but that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing. I'm actually backtracking now too is so because it's interesting because there's one part you mentioned about you being in an accident, hurting your back in Brazil, and then with doctors saying that you might not be able to walk, and then all of a sudden you're able to heal. I mean, how much is that contributes to like to your mind and maybe the practice of meditation and yoga versus the doctors maybe just being wrong in their diagnosis?
So I think that I like to call my experience with my injury a conspiracy of miracles, and I say that because so anyone who gets a spinal cord injury, so my vertebrae, my L4 smashed into my L5, I fell backwards out of a window, I broke my tailbone, and then long story, we'll get to that though, I'm sure at some point. It was a freak accident, but anywho, it happened, and I fell out of a window, and I thought that I would get caught by this palapa roof, and instead I ended up going through it. So thankfully that absorbed a lot of my fall weight. I fell about 30 feet from a second story, and then when I landed, I fractured my tailbone in half, and then my L4 smashed into my L5. It's called a burst compression fracture. So within my spinal cord, my vertebrae itself actually like almost mini like exploded. So there was like a tiny little 0.5 centimeter piece of it left attached to the spinal cord, and then the rest of the bone fragments were inside the spinal cord. Now, the conspiracy of miracles thing happened in the sense that the doctor said that within like the width of 2 human hairs, none of the bone fragments moved to actually sever any nerve endings in my spinal cord, because once that happens, obviously it's irreparable, the damage that's done, and it can't be fixed by modern medicine. The fact that like they like just literally couldn't figure out how I didn't even get my surgery until 2 weeks later. I got flown home on 3 airplanes, and no one could explain to me why those bone fragments didn't move. So that within itself, I think, is made me feel pretty blessed and grateful that there is very clear messaging around like my health being protected to some level or another. And the thing about Western medicine is that I fundamentally feel, and I mean, I don't know how this format goes, but I'd love to ask you some questions if you're open to that at some point too.
That's fine.
Is that I feel like Western medicine is amazing for triage medicine, like for, you know, tourniquets and surgeries and things that certain herbs and Ayurveda and wellness attributes can't fix. But I do feel that there is a lack of balance in how we treat people in our Western medicine system. So I am so honored that they did such an amazing job of my surgery, and I feel so blessed to have had the doctor that I had, who was incredibly skilled, and my scar is reasonable and all of that. But afterwards, I sort of like had to dive into my spiritual toolbox of not giving into fear, asking everyone around me to not mention my diagnosis, because I think diagnosis and determination are very easily conflated. I think what is not necessarily irresponsible, but what is customary in Western medicine is that doctors will tell you what they think is most likely to happen to you, and people take it on as a foregone conclusion. So my diagnostics of probably never walking again, I had to fight against to not make the determination of my body. And so that meant a lot of closing my eyes, a lot of visualizing myself dancing, visualizing myself walking, a lot of gratitude prayers, a lot of laughing with my boyfriend and my family and my nurses, and like all these sorts of things. So I tried to be really, really intentional. And then for my out of hospital care, my physio, when she was like, you can walk 1 flight of stairs, I would just try to walk 2. And one time around the parking lot, I would go 2, you know, just sort of like kind of training my mind to reinforce to my body its possibilities more than its limitations. And I actually, that's all from meditation and Buddhism, that sort of understanding of prayer relationship, and trusting that, actually. And then on the nutritional side, I did a lot of research on people who had healed themselves from huge influxes of pharmaceutical drugs and the best way to heal from surgery. I just researched a ton of information. I talked to a bunch of people who were actually overcame very invasive surgeries for cancer and for brain surgery. And so it was like infrared sauna, high dose vitamin C, high dose magnesium, high dose chlorophyll, and tons and tons and tons of juicing. And I ate a specific diet called eating for elimination.
Wow.
So that all the toxins in your body would remove themselves as fast as possible. And I think that combination of things, as well as getting off of the heavy codeine laced painkillers as fast as possible. I was still on T3s, but I got off Oxycontin within 4 days because I couldn't function. I just had very little wits about me. I think that sort of whole comprehensive piece was what allowed me to heal, and being in a safe place with my family, and obviously lots and lots of sleep and lots of water. So yeah, to answer your question, yes, I do think those things helped.
Interesting. It almost sounds like that in Western medicine, or even, I don't want to say doctors, but just Western medicine in general, maybe they should have a more positive outlook, right? Because when you, like what you said, when they diagnose you and then when they say like, hey, you probably can't walk, so it's almost like, well, why can't you at least offer some hope for the patient, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so wouldn't that be kind of more helpful that way, so you don't have to train your mind to think more positively and try to heal yourself, from your mind and within?
I mean, I agree with you. And I mean, it's interesting. Like, I don't know what is like the healing tradition in your culture or in your family, or what you're, it's so interesting. Like, because Western society doesn't revere like the healer archetype or the storyteller archetype or the elder archetype, even because those things have sort of become missing from our culture. We don't have access to those nuanced healing modalities you're talking about. Like, we don't have necessarily that like warm matriarch or the elder who tells of the stories of empowerment through generations of, a lineage of divinity within a certain type of society or a certain type of community or a certain type of tradition. So I do 100% think that we are a very new technocracy based sort of civilization, and we are in that way missing a lot of heart-based attributes, especially in the medical system. And I think even now specifically, this is sort of a weirdly appropriate time to touch on these things. I personally have experienced a lot of medical negligence through pharmaceutical industries in my family that have caused
Wow.
a lot of grievances in my families, and I won't necessarily use time to go into that, but I would just say that from my personal experience, I would say know your body, advocate for yourself, advocate for your loved ones, do your own research, and know that human beings are fallible. And at the end of the day, your body is the most precious thing, and you have to feel comfortable in every decision that you make surrounding it. And only you, whoever you are, the individual, can know what's best for them at any given time, you know. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about the way, especially in, you know, California here too, is like people are very conscious about trying to find new ways to heal themselves and understanding the principles of food and understanding the principles of health
Yeah.
in a broader spectrum. So I'm excited for that and for the generations to follow in that way.
Okay. Okay. No, that's, I agree with you. It's a good thing now. Um, I actually love when you say conspiracy of miracles, because I feel like the miracles part is almost, I don't even know if you believed in it or not, that maybe God has something to do with this, or if there's even such a figure called God.
Yeah. I mean, what do you? Okay, let's trade.
Oh,
Let's
okay.
trade questions for a
Okay.
second. What do you? Why? Okay, I can. And my answer is very simple. But how do you dance through life, like in that way? Like, how do you attribute or magical moments in your life that you could have never even imagined, and the fortuitous nature of them? Do you believe in something outside of yourself, or not? Doesn't matter. I'm just asking.
I do believe in something outside of myself. But I mean, it's not like I don't have a dedicated or concrete figure, like, like God, like how a
Mm-hmm.
lot of religions have their own figures. I don't
Mm-hmm.
really have that. It's more just kind of like, okay, well, I know something's out there. I'm just not sure what it is, but I kind of feel it, here and there. And it's funny too, because when you're talking about the miracles part as well, I mean, I never actually thought about this. Earlier in my younger years,
Mm-hmm.
I think now is where I start to be more aware and realize, because of doing enough meditation or just exploring my mind a little bit more, where I start to think a little bit more. Because before I feel like I was just like kind of autopilot and just coasting. So when things
Mm-hmm.
happen, when something happened, I didn't really consider it to be a miracle or anything. I just go like, oh, okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
this thing happened, okay, and moving on,
Mm-hmm.
which is bad, because
Mm-hmm.
it just means that you're kind of just like a drone, you're just coasting through life, just doing whatever it is you're doing. And so that was bad, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
that was my take on it at the time. Um, because yeah, I'm pretty sure that you know maybe there was some miracle stuff that had happened to me my early childhood years that I didn't really reflect back on. I mean, because
Yeah.
before I had bad habits of also texting while I'm driving too, and God knows that I could have been dead by then from car accident, but somehow I'm still
Mm-hmm.
here. So maybe that's something worth exploring. And okay, well, maybe there is such thing as some kind of protector, because maybe some people have some kind of angel protecting them.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's true, but I've heard stories about it.
Mm-hmm. And that's changed for you as you've gotten older? Do you feel like you could be comfortable in saying that there is a sort of sense of maybe protectorship or guardianship that you've experienced in your life? Or are you still playing with that concept?
I'm still playing with that concept. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's almost like there's two brains, and one part of me say, I don't know if that's even true, and the other
Mm-hmm.
part is, well, just don't just ignore it or dismiss it. I mean, at least consider the possibilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's always kind of like a conflicting conversation or internal battle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just for everything, not just what we're talking about here, right? Everything in life is always I mean, that's why meditation helps so much, because you're able to start to step out of yourself and listen to your own voices, or
Mhm.
start to realize your own voices, your own thoughts. Because we have so much going on in our heads throughout the day, throughout the week, years, however how long. Because that's just how our
Mhm.
minds work.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, and also too, in modern society, a human being's nervous system is like more taxed, our mind more stimulated, our time more spoken for than
Yeah.
ever before in human history, actually, almost to the point where our biology has a really difficult time keeping up with the intellectual demands of life, and certainly the intellectual demands of an economic based society, a monetary society. So for me personally, I actually find a greater sense of ease in life
Mhm.
when I feel like I'm not in charge of anything, because I think it's also, I mean, if I may veer off just for 1 second, but it's like,
Sure.
I also think that part of what is such a burden that we carry on our shoulders as human beings is like this illusion of control that we have. And I think if anything, this year has demonstrated to people quite a lot that all the things that we thought we were in control of are actually quite illusory, outside of the what we can put in our bodies, who we spend time with, like how we choose our partners or our relationships and our friends. Outside of those like fundamental things, and how we treat people, of course. And for me, I have found that gives me a lot more peace if I unburden myself from thinking that I'm supposed to have it all figured out and that I need to predict the future. And just by actually, in prayer or in meditation, by asking for the things that I need, or for the things that I would like, or, praying for the health and safety of loved ones, I can't give you any graph or chart that says this is 100% true, or this is exactly 100% how it's working. But I will tell you that there is some sort of like sense of release that I feel in that practice. And it gives me a sense of easing my anxiety, and that it is in the ultimate hands of what, we very commonly refer to as the universe. And in my experience, the universe has been incredibly, it's definitely slapped me a few times upside the side of the head, but
Yeah.
in hindsight, always for my benefit. Even if it was painful, and there were things attached to it, was always for my benefit. I think there are tragedies in life that are totally without human reason or rationale, but for the majority of the things that I've experienced, and certainly the things that I've asked for, I feel like there is a sense of listening, if not, and I feel protection, but definitely a sense of listening.
And that's where you kind of gain, I guess, the inner peace.
Yeah,
Sounds
it makes me. Yeah, it's just like a little life hack for me that works for me, and gives me a lot of joy, and allows me to maintain a lot of joy in my life. Is But I mean, like, trust me, I get real up in my head
yeah.
as well. Like,
Right.
it's not like I'm up here on a mountaintop just being like, oh yeah, I got this figured out. I'm like constantly having like
Right.
little
Right.
going on up here,
Yeah.
like most of us.
Yeah.
But when I can literally just drop that and just ask for what I need, I feel a lot lighter.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it's a lifelong journey. It really is a kind of discovery throughout. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone really has an answer. I mean, frankly, I feel like pretty much everyone in the world probably struggling with something, or I mean, really, who really has all their shit figured out? I mean, that's the thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, I personally haven't met anyone. I've seen some people on the internet that look pretty dialed, but I
Right. Right.
haven't. I certainly haven't. I certainly
Yeah.
haven't met anyone in real life that has ascended to that point.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a very high level. You're talking about like Buddha level, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, because this is a conversation I had with another friend yesterday. We were actually recording our last episode, and yeah, we got into some pretty interesting stuff. But anyways, because I was about to, what was my follow up question? I had a follow up question. Um,
we were talking about what you believe in terms of like protecting, and then like going back and forth about what you think and then what you don't think. And then you asked me what I thought, and I said, I
Yeah.
gave you a very long answer about why I think
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, no, no. Well, actually, no, my follow-up question was really more, uh, once again, backtracking a little bit, because you had told me that, okay, once you moved back here to LA, you thought there was kind of a deficiency, um, and then, I mean, I don't know if that's the reason why you start moving somewhere else, but why did you say that you thought there was like a deficiency, like when you moved back in the city? Was it just too overwhelming, or?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think for it's just because I was sort of in an energetic state of just like hustling and partying and like meeting tons of people, and
Yeah.
just like, just essentially just overstimulated.
Mm,
And in that process, I wasn't really grounded in my self-care, and certainly not in my spiritual self-care. It wasn't a bad thing. I loved my time in LA, and the reason I went home is because my student visa was up. So I just couldn't find a way to stay down there. I love California in general. But when I came home, I was like, wow, okay, I feel pretty far away from myself,
mhm,
just because I was sort of corresponding to a priority of a value system that wasn't necessarily what was really truly feeding me.
mm,
It was feeding me a different part of me, but
okay.
so yeah, so that's what I mean. And then so when I got home, I was like, I'm not going to drink for a long time, and I need to be quiet and sleep a lot.
So did you think that your values were more like you trying to get someone else's approval, or like, or try to fit in someone else's requirement? Is that how it was for you?
Well, I think, I mean, as you know from yourself, like living in LA, and I don't know if you grew up here, but certainly if you moved here from somewhere else, like it's a big city. It's like super overwhelming. You got to
Yeah.
find your way around. It's not making new friendships like requires a lot of work and maintenance and the getting to know just in general, but especially in LA just because of the driving commitment. And then also too on top of that, like trying to like meet people in the film industry, and then going to all the right parties, and then like making sure that and yeah, I was just always like kind of like a kid in a candy store. There's always so many things to do and so many people to see and like so many places to go. And yeah, I always felt like I was in a constant state of FOMO, almost, if you will.
Oh yeah, I
um
know. Fear of missing out. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's the yeah. There's like actually a small little book I read about that. Yeah, that's a real thing. Yeah.
Yeah, totally, right? And I was like, holy shit. I was like, you could live here for fucking, part my language. I was like, you could live here your entire life and like go 4 new places every day, and you would still never see everything. And I was just like,
Yeah,
that blows my mind.
yeah, yeah,
Because to put it in context, like Canada is the second biggest country in the world based on landmass,
yeah,
and the population is only 36 million, and the population of California is like 42 million.
yeah.
So for me, I was like, whoa, this is a lot of people.
Right. Yeah, but
Hmm.
but the whole concept of fear of missing out, though, too, for you having to do all that stuff that you do, like whether you're traveling or going to parties. I mean, in some sense, that's just almost like some kind of insecurity, right? Because why do you have to see everything? Like, let's say you see someone on Instagram posting a picture of them at some national park. Why do you feel like you're
Hmm.
missing out on that? Why do you have to go, visit that place too? So it's almost like I feel like a lot of people are trying to prove others wrong, or I don't know, or maybe they're just want to kind of become followers and just do what other people are doing because they think that's the cool thing.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that's mentally, if that's good for the society as a whole
Hmm.
in the long.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a good, like, let's definitely shift gears and touch base on that, because that's like something that I'm definitely passionate about exploring. When I was there, I think it was more just the newness and the novelty of being in a space. I wouldn't say that I felt compelled to necessarily be in a I wasn't feeling as much in the social media sort of comparative lifestyle choice. I was sort of trying to figure it out on my own. But that being said, like in any small community, there's like standardized rituals. So in the small artistic community or film community, like, you know, there's certain rituals of like going to certain things and meeting certain people and love. So I definitely got caught up in something that I was seeing modeled for me in a community. But as a departure from that, so this was, I'm saying 6.5 years ago. So I think Instagram, I was like barely using
Yeah.
Instagram six
Yeah.
years ago, right? So I would say like we can definitely talk about the arc in that period of time. And I feel so blessed that when I came to LA, I wasn't 22. So it didn't get a chance to like eat me up or change my personality or like, you know, change my value system. But Instagram in general, Facebook, you know, Snapchat, I have an 11-year-old niece and I have a 26-year-old half brother, and being able to witness what the effect of social media is when you grow up, like literally with a cell phone in your hand, it's heartbreaking in a lot of ways. I would say my brother was always, we're very outdoorsy people. My brother had a very like distant relationship with social media. I think he's ever even had a social media account since he was 18. And my niece though, you know, she just turned 11. For her, it's like, I feel like it's too much for children, to be honest. I feel like it's very detrimental to their personalities and to their development. I even feel as like a woman in my 30s that you know, on lower days or bad days when you're just like, don't have your shit together, you know, sometimes it can be difficult on an emotional level. And I don't know if this is your experience as well. But yeah, it can be hard because to look through and like all of a sudden, like now I have access to an infinite number of people's lives, and we're really mainly showcasing the highlight parts of our lives and not as much the realities of our vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
So that can be a hard thing to navigate on days when you don't feel emotionally grounded. And I absolutely don't think it's good for children at all. And I certainly don't think it's good for the development of adolescence. But thankfully, I think people are waking up to that fact, you know?
Okay. And before you, I guess you say, before you woke up, I mean, I don't know if that's the right term to use, but before you woke up, did you feel like all that kind of activities or even social media, do you feel like it's kind of sucking away your soul a little bit or your inner spirit or whatever you want to call it?
I mean, I'd love for you two to comment on what your experience is with it after this response. But I would say it can be a great tool when you use it as a tool. As an artist, it's an important tool for me as a writer. But you know, I think less scroll, less troll, and like that's a good motto to live by, you know.
Yeah.
I think it can be a beautiful tool for connection, it can be a beautiful tool for collaboration, and it can be a beautiful tool for expression. But yeah, you just got to try to figure out what's your own like limits and play within those kind of vibe. Well, how is it for you? What's your
Well, I've always had a bad habit of comparing myself to others, which is just it's a really flawed. That's a really flawed. Yeah, that's something for me. I'm constantly working on because, you know, because I grew up in a traditional Asian household, and it's very normal for. Well, of course, now I don't think it's normal anymore. But you know, as a kid, I didn't know about this, but it is very normal, common for Asian parents to compare their kids with, you know, you know, other Asian kids or even their family friends' kids or something like that. And I think over time that it's almost like Inception. I had that idea or whatever, you know, planted in my head, and so throughout my adulthood, that's kind of what has always been happening. And social media has been bad in that sense because it is so easy for you to compare yourselves with other people, right? Because you know, you see someone, they post a picture of like, oh, okay, they just bought a new house, and they're standing in front of their house or somewhere amazing, right? And then you start to I mean, of course, comparison, and then you start to feel envy of it, and then that envy is
Mhm.
bad, jealousy is all that's bad because and so yeah, for me, that's the hard part for me to try to limit myself and understand like, okay, all these people, like what you said, they're just posting their highlights. It really shouldn't
Mhm.
matter. Who cares if they're you know doing this or at this place or like they're showing off their amazing
Mhm.
physique or whatever, that it shouldn't matter, right? And that's something that I'm trying to get my mind out of that, and part of the reason why I'm you know going on this whole journey is to separate myself from that,
Mm.
and yeah, so that's my take on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I think our society has normalized a lot of really toxic behaviors. I
Yes.
think that we are going to be going through, certainly because of what's happened this year, um, a lot of difficulties, but I think there is actually a lot of really beautiful things inherent in this time of slowing down and this time of connecting with each other in different ways and this time of reprioritizing what's really valuable for us and meaningful for us. And I think that, stepping away from the idolatry of celebrity culture and like stepping away from go, 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 go all the time and stepping away from, um, maybe behavior patterns or relationship denial issues or whatever it might be, whatever's not like been serving us, that's just kind of we haven't given enough time or attention to, is really the time for us to rethink our tools. And, social media is definitely one of those quick fixes of distraction and quick fixes of dopamine that our society has elevated to a place of normalcy, very similar to terrible food, very similar to alcohol. So we have built into a society that overworks people these quick fixes to distract ourselves and to uh, alleviate our pain in the short term, essentially. So something that has been a really hard lesson for me to learn in my life is that discipline is actually the freedom, um, not indulging and like not temptation. There isn't really any freedom in that, even though it feels like it. And um, I find that for me, I don't love to be online. I don't love to be
Mhm.
inside.
Yeah.
I don't love to do the things that are considered to
Yeah.
be
Normal.
high tech. Yeah, exactly. Like modernized world.
Yeah.
I like to utilize them as tools. Um, but yeah, I'm pretty simple in terms of what I feel really joyful about. And I think that there needs to be, and there should be a lot of space for people to experience life in whatever diverse manner that they wish to. And I think the more we can start stepping away from collective shoulding each other, you should do that, he should do this, she should do this is what this should look like. Like, you know what I mean? It's like that is, to me, I think such a fucking, pardon my language, dead end ideology, and it causes people so much pain. And it certainly, as a woman, has cost me many, many hours of my life of like, I should be this skinny, or I should be this, you know, this rich, or I should be this da 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 da. I think, we've all gone through that. So yeah, I feel you on the renaissance of the spirit and of the heart that I think has a possibility to emerge out of this time in a great way. Um,
Yeah, well, that's the hope, because there are still a lot of people, or a handful of people, where you could argue they're still acting the same, because eventually people kind of adjust to the situation, and then our minds also settle in.
mhm,
And so in the beginning, yeah, maybe someone might be all of a sudden feeling more grateful for their situation, and blah blah blah. But then maybe after a couple months, once they adjust and settle down, then
mhm,
they start going back into kind of like the good old routine. If it's a bad habit, they start going through their bad habits again.
mhm,
um
totally.
yeah, and then I don't know, how it is for you, when it comes to going through your routine of meditation and yoga and all that. I don't know if you're able to get rid of a lot of your bad habits, or even, I guess, what's the word I'm trying to look for? Kind of recalibrate, I guess, your internal compass.
Oh, like, and to be totally transparent, I completely fell off the wagon this year since,
Oh, okay.
probably since, oh my God, no, because stress is like, whenever we feel stressed, like we immediately go to our coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
Like for me, that's like sleeping in late, emotional eating, like, I have a whole laundry list of coping mechanisms. That may be too much red wine sometimes. So definitely with this year for me, especially having my industry of like events and live music and gatherings, which straight up just actually don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I wasn't like 6 o'clock in the morning doing sun salutations. I was like drinking a half bottle of red wine to myself. But I think the good news about what's cool about being a human is like we get far away from ourselves. It's like everything in nature, right? There's a balancing. So we can get far away from ourselves to a point, and then we're like, wow, this is really like not where I want to be. And then we gradually find ways to come back to it, and I've only recently come to a place where I feel even slightly grounded enough that I'm like just starting to kind of put myself back together again, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And try to embrace this like, brave, wild new world of like Zoom relationships and like online working and, as we're all trying to reconfigure together. So I have an incredible amount of empathy and I'm learning to have a lot more compassion for myself, because I certainly know that every single person is experiencing this current new relationship to reality in their own individual way. And there's no right or wrong to any of it, actually. And I also think that in life, this shoulding or this compartmentalized or this comparative sense of expectation on how you should execute your existence is not only, a primary thief of joy, but it's also very distracting from what is authentically present for us in our hearts, and claiming that. And I think, yeah, I don't know. I think there's something really cool, but the hope that I have that like when all of the shoulds and the being the good girl or bad girl, and doing what your parents wanted you to do and all that kind of stuff, when we throw that all out at the end of the day and we really just concentrate on like, hey, like what actually just like makes me feel joyful, if it's painting a picture or dancing in my living room or writing a story or like singing karaoke or like whatever, or making a beautiful food, whatever that is, I think energetically, the more we start to cultivate that on an individual level, like it will have an effect. It does have a ripple out effect. And that's my great prayer for humanity, actually. Not to sound totally lofty, but like
Okay.
I hope that we get more space to be in relationship with what makes us joyful,
So actually, I do have like, a follow up comment and question about that too, because I get where you're coming from, and I hope in the long run, humanity can have that change. But at the same time, do you feel like maybe yourself, you're experiencing this too, or maybe you see your other friends experience this, but let's say like, let's say feeling compassion, for others, or feeling love. Some people tend to maybe not truly feel it, but let's say they're showing love because they maybe in their head they're telling themselves, oh well, during this pandemic area, well, this period, I should be grateful for all the things I have. So maybe I'll just force myself to be grateful, but they're not actually truly grateful. You see the difference?
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know how it is for you. I don't know if it's like for you, you're actually feeling it like even as a sensation, or you're just kind of like going through, well, I shouldn't say going through the motions, but almost like putting on a face, in some sense. If you maybe I'm not explaining this very well.
No, I think I understand what you're saying. And I definitely think that like For sure. That's part of it, right? Is like we do these behaviors that we think that we should be doing because
Yes.
we have to like tell ourselves to do them and that we're supposed to get some sort of benefit from the end. It's
Yes.
like even with meditation, people like force themselves to sit down, but really they're just like thinking about a million things and they're like, am I doing it right? And I don't really feel any different. And like that's maybe shit.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
shit, or like I'm
Yeah.
shit and I'm doing
Yeah.
it wrong. And
Yeah.
like who
Yeah.
knows? And then
Yeah.
they never
Yeah.
do it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah.
so that's what I mean about the individual process of like self-discovery is like the things that actually put you in your heart. I feel like those are the only things that will ever give you enough patience and openness to be able to really truly be like, okay, you know, I don't have to attach to this feeling, or I can let this go, or I can be less angry here, or fucking man, I tell you how powerful forgiveness is. Forgiveness of self and forgiveness of others is like one of the most powerful things that I've experienced in my life.
Yeah.
And it offers so much freedom mentally and emotionally. And yeah, I think the easiest life hack that requires zero relationship to thinking you're doing it right, because I know that sometimes people are like, I'm scared of yoga because I'm not graceful or I'm not flexible. I totally get it. We all have our things. I hate jogging in public. It's just like a weird thing in my head.
Yeah.
I think everyone's looking at me and I'm doing it wrong. And I'm just like, I look like Napoleon
Yeah.
Dynamite
Yeah.
no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
everyone has their
Sure.
everyone has their
Sure.
things. I
Yeah.
have them.
Yeah.
Everyone has them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I mean is like, I also think that we equally have these things that just light us up. For me, it's dancing. And for me, it's, you know, spending time with children. And I love being outside. I love trees. I love open fields. I love looking at the sky. I love that. So whenever I can, you know, go for a walk for an hour by myself without thinking of doing anything special and nothing, like I don't have to plan anything, but just like even just taking that time to do that, I find that when I come back, I have a totally shifted level of awareness where I'm able to perceive things differently, if that makes any sense. I'm less in my head, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, because during like your walk, you're probably connecting with the nature,
Hmm.
feeling or sensing. I guess any life force around or spirits, right? I mean, roughly, that's probably how I would
Yeah,
explain it.
yeah, agreed. I mean, I definitely think it's undeniable, even if you're not going there for for that reason. Like how many people, you know, drive and just pull their car over at sunset or take their families to the beach. Doesn't mean that they're all like, oh, Mama Gaia, I love you, sunset. Thank you
Yeah,
so much. It's
yeah,
just that there's something inside of us that is connected to the natural world. You know, all of our ancestors and all indigenous traditions and all traditions before, you know, the Industrial Revolution all built their entire life on the rules of nature and our harmonic um, existence within those rules and within those systems. So yeah, I think it's easy for us to go there and feel really held, which is what I feel. And then from that feeling, I'm able to find other ways that are actually like better for me to take care of myself.
okay. And is that how that led you to because I know you went to this I guess program called what, Pachamama community.
Yeah.
I read a little bit about it, so I mean, tell me about that. I mean, because it sounds like, from everything you experienced, being out in nature, maybe that led to you going through this, attending this community or checking it out, basically.
Yeah, well, what led me to community? So I've been to Costa Rica once before in 2018, and I've always loved like I've been to Nicaragua and Costa Rica and to Mexico many times, and I just love the type of wild living. I love it in Southeast Asia, like I love it in small places on the Mediterranean that I've been to. I just love wild living, flip flops, jumping on motorbikes, like just eating mangoes off the trees, and I've always gravitated toward that type of relationship to nature. And so I went to Pachamama because recently, I would say in the past, since I last saw you, my whole value system of what I thought I wanted or what I thought was cool has completely shifted.
Mhm.
I don't want to live in like a big bustling crazy city and like go to nightclubs all the time and like, I don't I'm not as fed by that. In January of this year, I actually moved out of Vancouver in the city, and I put all my stuff in storage, and I went to Pachamama, and I was like, I want to live in a rural area. I want to have access to a city to like be able to like do art and perform and like go to events. But I want to live in a community, a rural community. So going to Pachamama, Pachamama is that. It is a really cool community that was founded 20 years ago, that has been built up over time. And it is a spiritual and wellness-based community. They correspond to the principles of Osho, who is like an Indian, I'm sure most people have heard of Osho, but he was like an Indian teacher that was very popular, and brought his methodologies from India to America in the 60s and 70s. And so there's things that bound the community together. So we'd all meditate, every day at 6 o'clock? Yeah. 6 o'clock to 7:15. And then we'd all, we'd have to go a minimum number of 4 or 5 times a week. And then we'd all eat together, and we would all do yoga together, and we would all dance together. And inside of the community, it was mandatory that you would do at least one personal development workshop for a minimum of 3 days every month. And so those sorts of things where people are always investigating themselves and always, and like it's a totally sober community. They don't even use sugar or any animal products or anything like that. So not only are you cleaning up the actual physical temple, but you're also in communion with the natural world and communion with community. And they have a school there. So there's like a bunch of young children. And I loved it. I just found the principles of that type of living are so much more in alignment with the things that I thought that I wanted when I was, in my 20s. And I loved my 20s, don't get me wrong, but like a slower pace and more priority for wellness and for emotional wellness is sort of where I'm excited to spend my energy and my curiosity. And so I was there for 6 weeks doing a work exchange volunteer program. And yeah, I don't have actually really a bad thing to say about it. I met some amazing people. I went there alone. I had my birthday there. Like I'm super excited. I'm going to go back actually next month. Cool. If you haven't gone, I would look into going if you're interested. It's definitely kicks your ass. If you, whatever those like latent daddy issues you might have had, like you're going to deal with those.
Okay. So that's where you discover all your issues then, your self-development, personal development courses. That's how you figure it out.
Yeah. Like we're so interesting as people. And like, I think it's so fun to have reflections like in groups of strangers, or even with your romantic partners, or within your family members. Like we're constantly in a dance of getting our own shit reflected back at us. And I think the process of maturity is that we engage with it versus running away from it. And what I've understood through the system of yoga and meditation is that when we actually deny what is coming up for us, or we deny our emotions, or we deny our pain, it lives inside the body. And that's actually what causes a lot of disease and mental imbalances and chronic illness later in life. So I mean, sense of humor, and it's like you just gotta have a sense of humor about all of it, because none of it makes sense,
Yeah, you have to be open to it, I mean, that's the thing about most people, is that the people who aren't open to, even such a community, then it just wouldn't really have the full effects or full benefits, if you want to look at it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I absolutely know what you mean. I mean, to me, it's not crazy. It's not. It's kind of part of the journey and part of what you need to do. And it's great that you're able to dig up all your childhood issues, everything deeper within your roots, right? Through this community, or through whatever you're doing, like, previous years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, have you yourself, as a storyteller and like a very sensitive, and from what I remember, a very astute soul, like, what is your relationship with acknowledging certain patterns in your life and where they come from? Is that a process that you've that you participate in at all?
I mean, for me, the most I've done was, I mean, I had done like a 1 hour meditation session before, actually just a couple of weeks back, but usually I just do meditation on my own, like, using apps like Headspace or whatever, for like 10 minutes a
Mhm.
day.
Mhm.
I mean, it was okay. I didn't find it. Well, but that's another thing too. I guess is one of those where I thought, maybe it's one of the moments where I was forcing myself to do it because I was looking for a benefit. So, which my approach was already kind of wonky or wrong,
Mhm.
and so now I'm trying to recalibrate and approach it differently, and just go in. If I'm gonna meditate, go in and not even think about too much of it. And getting back to the point about the storytelling, all that. I certainly things have changed in a sense where maybe even the stories I'm telling, maybe they become a little bit more like, maybe more just kind of existential concepts, more so than like actual Hollywood plot that you always see in the movie theater. So it's a little bit more, I guess you can say the word would be abstract, right?
Mhm.
So I find that a lot of the stories that I'm telling is kind of pointing towards more of an abstract idea. I mean, I
Hmm.
don't know if it's good or bad. I mean, that just kind of comes out like, it just comes out differently than before. Because I mean, last time we worked together, it was just some like kind of like fun little horror thing that we're doing.
Mhm.
And I mean, not that I'm not interested in that kind of stuff, but I mean, it just becomes a little bit more secondary. Actually, even storytelling or even filmmaking for me nowadays has become a little bit more secondary. Uh, I think maybe that's where the values have shifted for me as well.
Mhm.
It's the same as for you, where your values, you thought like, okay, this is what I wanted, but you actually realize like, oh, well, this is really way off. So that's kind of the same for me, where not that I don't like to make films or do any of that, but I realize that, okay, is that all I want to do? I mean, there has to be some other things going on that I can explore, other options that are, whatever it is, right? So that's something that's like an ongoing process for me to try to figure out what
Mhm.
is. Um, but then, of course, it's funny because I think part of the problem also too is that I forgot who said this. I think it was Alan Watts who said this.
Mhm.
If you know who, well, I think everyone knows who Alan Watts is,
Yeah.
a famous philosopher. I don't
Mhm.
know if it's him, but if it was not him, then I truly apologize. I totally screwed it up. But he did mention that life, basically life shouldn't really have a destination. It shouldn't. It's life. It should be just kind of like the process, like a journey. So I think a lot of the problems of human beings that we always look for a destination in life, meaning like, oh, once I have achieved this house or career, then I'm set. My life is good, right? But then you realize that's not the case. You realize
Yeah.
that's not really a destination. It's it's just like a outside. It's just kind of like an object or item that gives you pleasure or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I thought that was a pretty interesting um, philosophy, and I agree with it. There shouldn't really be a destination because each person's destination. I mean, if there is a destination, each person's destination would be different if there even one at all. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so that's kind of how for me it has changed a little bit. At least the last time we've talked, like 6 years ago, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think that's beautiful, and like that's such a nice, incredible reflection for you in your life. And I love Alan Watts very much,
Yeah.
and my partner often is quoting the fact that there's a quote that Alan Watts also says where it's like, life was meant to be a musical thing,
Yeah.
and if we're not singing and dancing
Oh
all
yeah.
along, then we've missed the point. Something like very close to that.
Yeah.
Um, and it is a musical thing. And we are meant to be singing and dancing, and I think that that's what children and actually quite elder people teach us. It's like there's this sort of softening and flowering in the beginning and the end stages of life, and somewhere in the middle we become like hyper indentured into concepts around obligations and responsibilities that I think can sometimes take us out of our hearts, and that's also by necessity a lot of times as well. So I don't think I really truly have come upon this place in my life where I don't think that there is a wrong way to live your life. I think the only person that would ever be able to correspond with the concept of wrong is within you, the person, the individual.
Yeah.
And if you are, not being true to yourself, or if you're hurting yourself, then that would be the time to reflect and to make changes and to evolve. I think the concept that people can't change is totally bullshit.
Sure.
I've experienced many changes in my life, and I've seen and witnessed many changes of many people that I care about in my life. And we're constantly evolving and constantly ascending and constantly changing. And we also then will move backwards again and move forward. And I think intrinsic in that is the deeper sense of humility, is like, if we were only, like you said, like if life was just about the destination, and then like we come out of the womb and all of a sudden we're ascended masters, and there would be no point in this whole thing that we're taking part in. And I think that it's so funny how the destination is related to our projection of the future, or our relationship to the past. And, as Alan Watts says, and as Buddha says, and as, Muji says, and as Yogananda says, I mean, everyone, we're all, as children, show us, I think they're such incredible teachers, children are. They show us all the time, as animals show us all the time, that joy comes from the present moment. It truly does, and so when you say things to me like abstractions, there's also sort of like a beautiful open space for creativity there, because you're not putting too much thought or direction into it, and it's a really cool process of unlearning and undoing this sort of hyper conditioning that we all have as adults.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree with everything you said. I think it was beautiful that you said too. And, I love how you're doing some quotes in there. I mean, I always try to stop myself from quoting too much of different people, because sometimes when I'm talking to, that's actually another thing I'm working on too, is like a fear of judgment, because when I'm talking to, I guess you could say regular people, when I'm quoting, they might think that I'm pretentious or whatever. I'm just like, okay. That's just, so I sometimes I try to stop myself, but at the same time I realize exactly like what you said throughout the whole conversation, like why should I, if that's something that brings me joy, and that's something that I can grow and helps me evolve and grow, then whatever, right? And if other people don't accept that's how it is, then okay, well then probably maybe you're not really woke, you're just kind of still asleep in a way, and whatever, right? Then those are people that whether I want to connect with or not on a long-term basis, and I'll just have to reevaluate is how I see it. Because I've also been reading a lot of Stoic philosophy as well, or trying to understand that.
Oh, Stoicism, cool.
I mean, I always quote Seneca a lot, and then there's obviously Marcus Aurelius, because I think they have very interesting ideas as well. Because I mean, of course, I don't know if they have background in like any of the stuff like meditation or even Buddhism or not whatnot. Maybe, I mean, because even philosophy ideas, I think a lot of them stems or derives from certain foundational ideas from like maybe Buddhism, or even from a little bit from meditation or even yoga, right? Because they're all kind of linked together and all connect together. So it's a very interesting. They have some interesting stuff. So I try to read a little bit more about it. Kind of, help. That's kind of the evolution, and
that's great.
I know I have a lot more questions. I know I'll have a lot more to ask you. but you know, it is that time where we are starting to wrap it up. I mean, I know I always have to tell my list. If anyone's listening, I always have to tell them that usually conversations last anywhere from like 45 minutes to an hour, but it actually kind of seems like that these conversations will probably have to be more in the future, but you know, for
Yeah,
now.
it's hard to put a time on flow. And I would just say that life is this ongoing, open-ended conversation. So we'll pick it
Yeah.
up another time. But just to reflect back, something that I think is really powerful in any process of discovery with any person is knowing that your fear of judgment and my fear of judgment and everyone's fear of judgment is the same fear. You know, we all have that.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting how we've convinced ourselves that we are the only person that was made not good enough, and everyone else seems to have it all together, and somehow, somewhere along the way, you know, we're not doing it as well as we should be. And what's crazy is that I don't think that there's one person that doesn't feel that way. And unfortunately, social media sort of exploits those vulnerabilities within us. And we get to this stage in life, like children exemplify for us, where we just have to say, fuck it. And those, to quote Dr. Seuss,
Oh, yeah, Dr. Seuss, all right.
those who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter.
Nice. I love
And you know, it's like your people will always have you and always have your back. And I think what's really cool about this time is like we've just shown that we can pick up after almost 6 years of not really staying in close contact. But once you have an imprint or a resonant frequency with somebody, it doesn't matter, you know, where they are in their life or how long has gone by, you will always be able to re-engage with that frequency. And it teaches you that we are actually on some level, and certainly this is just how I interpret it, maybe it's not how others interpret it, but how I interpret it is that we are connected by an energetic frequency that renders us always in a family at some point. You know, we're always able to find a common reflection in another person, even in a stranger sometimes, which is even cooler, about how much part of this beautiful, like, universal consciousness we are, that we're all thinking in and dreaming in and creating in and extracting from and contributing to. And you know, that's why, unless there's like, I don't even know who wrote this, but I remember reading it once when I was younger. It's like, unless there's love and freedom for all, unless there's freedom for and justice for all, there will be freedom and justice for none, because we are all needing to operate together in the most well state. So yeah, I'm just saying.
That's very, very well put. Because I was about to say was, even though we're all connected, you know, with some sort of energy or some vibe, but it's also possible that not everyone is in like your same wavelength, and so not everyone that you might be able to connect either on the same level or just it's almost like not the right fit, I guess you can say that. But I mean, at least that's kind of how I see it.
Totally. No, of course, 100%. And that's incredibly wise. But then that's just like, you know, knowing yourself. And it's like, this is where I want to put my energy in something that feels easeful and feels me, or do I want to put my energy in something that feels, you know, conflicting and difficult and drains me? You know, at a certain point, we have to sort of just make those choices in our relationships, in our workplace, in our, you know, whatever it is, whatever habits we've developed, you know, we might have to re-relate to them at some point. And I think that that's a super important process, because it just actually means you're learning how to love yourself better.
Yeah, no, this is really good stuff. Yeah, this is very profound from Vanessa here for anyone listening.
I definitely wouldn't say that.
Very wise. He's very, very wise. Okay. But anyways, yeah, you know, I am almost done my tea as well, so we're gonna leave it here, wrap it up here tonight. I'm sure we'll have Vanessa back. Who knows when? Yeah, you know, we'll have her back for part 2, I'm sure. But yeah, so we'll be back next week too. So you know, just keep following us, keep staying tuned with these conversations. They're really good stuff. So okay, anyways.
And thank you so much, Darren. It's been a blessing to drink tea with you and to
course.
smash brains together.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. Thank you very much, and goodbye, everyone.